I forgot that this, oh my God, you guys, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I forgot that this had 2 pieces of parchment and I just pulled them apart. Well, we're gonna let that one cool in the pan. Nothing a little jam won't fix. Hi everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. I'm so excited to be back here with new episodes of Dessert Person. And today I am making one of my favorite cookies, but I haven't made it yet on the channel and I really don't know what took me so long, but it is the Italian rainbow cookie, that classic of Italian-American bakeries everywhere. It's basically 3 layers of this kind of like dense and chewy almond cake smushed together, covered in chocolate. It's so good. I love them so much. And it always is like the best thing in the bakery. Like all the cookies are like not my favorite cookies, but that cookie, like that's the one I'm going for. And they're so delicious and I love the almond flavor. So I'm very excited to make them today. You know, I didn't do a deep dive into the history of these cookies. I'm just generally aware of their tradition in Italian-American baking. It's called a cookie because they're cut like cookies into like little, small kind of 2-bite pieces, but it's really kind of a cake cookie hybrid. And they're fun to make. The batter itself is really easy. The assembly process is like a little bit steppy, and so you have to be a little bit patient and make them, they have to kind of set up overnight. But the yield is really high. So if you're like cooking for a party or you're bringing them somewhere, it is kind of a great thing to make because once you cut the cookies, like you can make a lot. Starting with almond paste, very important ingredient. I have 5 large eggs, 2 cups all-purpose flour, 1.25 cups of granulated sugar, food coloring of course, some kosher salt, butter, both almond and vanilla extracts. Then for the assembly, I have strained raspberry jam and strained apricot jam. And then I have 7 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate, and that is what goes on top as a kind of final step before you cut. I have some plastic wrap because you'll need that for wrapping. I have a bunch of pans. So really the tricky part here is you have to bake the color separately. So you need 3 different pans for baking, and they should really ideally all be the same size. I have some parchment paper. This piece of aluminum foil is like a little dam. I'll explain why. And then you'll need a couple of extra mixing bowls for dividing the batter and tinting the 3 colors. And then I'm gonna use this, I have a kitchen scale behind me because I'm gonna weigh the batter so that I know I'm having equal amounts in each pan. The power of the stand mixer is really useful for this recipe because we're making a lot of batter and it's kind of a heavy batter. So stand mixer is ideal. So for baking the layers, I have my oven on 350. And actually, you know what I need to do is I need to adjust the racks because I'm gonna bake all 3 layers at once. They don't all fit on the same rack, so I'm gonna do 2 in the upper third and 1 in the lower third and then rotate. So I actually have to adjust. So now I have to prepare the pans. I have a little bit of melted butter and I'm gonna brush this in the pans, not really because I need them to be greased, but because it's gonna help the parchment to stick. So you could do like spray oil if it's just like faster and easier, I guess. And I'm gonna lay parchment on top, and the parchment's gonna make it really easy to transfer the cakes. And again, because they're thin, they can be a little bit delicate to handle, so the parchment is gonna actually help you be able to like maneuver and move the cakes around. So I just wanna lay the parchment down, and I cut them so that I have a little bit of overhang. And so I just wanna press these down really well, and it's gonna adhere because I have the butter in there. And I'm gonna press it against the sides too. And now same thing over here. I'm not greasing the parchment. And this recipe, there's 3 sticks of butter in the recipe, so each pan is gonna have the equivalent of 1 stick of butter. So like nothing's really gonna stick to the parchment at all anyway, but I'm also not greasing it because the cookie has these 3 layers of cake separated by layers of jam, and the jam kind of like glues the layers together. And if there's too much, if the cakes are greased, then it can prevent the jam from kind of like absorbing. And so I don't want that. I made a kind of little dam with aluminum foil. And it's just to sort of make a little barrier so that I have on this side basically the equivalent area of a 1/4 sheet tray. And I'm gonna lay this piece of parchment in. I'm just giving it like a little extra piece there so that it doesn't spread. Okay, so here's my prepped pans. And now I'm gonna move on to assembling the batter. The key ingredient in making rainbow cookies is almond paste, not marzipan. You'll always see like a little note of like, use almond paste, not marzipan. Marzipan is similar to almond paste, same ingredients, it just has a lot more sugar. The recipe calls for 8 ounces. If all you can find is the tube and you really don't want to buy a second tube, that's okay. Just use 7 ounces. It's just not that big of a deal. Now what you want is an almond paste that's pretty soft. So if you can, like, feel it inside the package and make sure that it's not gotten really hard and dried out. Because if it's very dried out, it's just not going to blend seamlessly into the batter and you're gonna get lumps. Okay, so I'm gonna start by basically crumbling this almond paste. You can see that it's nice and soft. I can easily put my thumbprint into it. I'm gonna start by just kind of crumbling this, pinching off pieces into my stand mixer bowl. Now, a note on this recipe. One difference that you'll see is sometimes the recipe calls for the eggs to be separated and the whites to be whipped and then folded in. I have made these before and I've done it that way, but what doesn't make sense to me about that is the batter starts really, really thick without the egg whites. And then you're trying to fold egg whites into something really thick. And so you're having to mix quite a lot. And then in addition to that, you're having to mix once you add the food coloring, and you end up deflating a lot of the eggs the whites that you're whipping anyway. So I have found that if you just use a little patience and a stand mixer and you keep the eggs whole, you can just work enough air into the batter just by creaming the butter and almond paste and sugar and then beating the eggs really well, that you don't need to do the separate step of whipping the egg whites, which is like a little annoying. So it saves you a bowl and like some washing. So this works really well. And I don't have any leavener and I don't have any baking powder or soda because these are a dense cookie. And they're supposed to have that kind of like, pleasant chewiness. But you still have to work a lot of air into it. Otherwise it would be like unpleasantly dense and greasy, frankly. Okay, so I'm gonna add, this is 3 sticks of butter, or 12 ounces, room temp. So almond paste is already sweetened, but I'm adding more sugar. This is 1.25 cups. My main complaint about a lot of Italian rainbow cookies is that they're too sweet and too almondy, like too much extract flavor. So I'm going, and you're adding jam, which is pretty sweet. So I'm trying to go for a cookie that's well balanced. I'm adding the salt because the salt comes in crystal form, just like sugar. And what's gonna happen here is the sugar crystals, they're sharp. They're going to cut into the butter and the almond paste, and I'm gonna be able to whip it and get this really light, fluffy mixture, and that's what I want, because I need to work air into this. So I'm gonna start on low, and this is gonna help break up the almond paste and like get it smooth it out, and incorporate the butter. Anytime creaming is a really important step, like you're making a cake or even certain cookies, it's best to have the butter at a cool room temp. So you don't want it to be so warm that it's starting to look shiny and like a little greasy, because it's that kind of cool room temp that's going to make it the ideal texture for incorporating air. So I'm gonna increase the speed a little. And you can see the almond paste is kind of breaking up. And I'm using the paddle. The paddle is what is going to help to get everything really smooth. And then it's the action of the paddle pressing everything against the side of the bowl that's going to create those air pockets with the sugar. All right, so you can see it's starting to incorporate. And I'm gonna turn up the speed. And I'm gonna let this go on medium-high. So on the KitchenAid, it's gonna be somewhere like between 6 and 7. And I'm gonna occasionally scrape it down. I still have some little bits of almond paste that haven't broken down, but they will break down. And I'm just gonna let this go until it's really pale and light and fluffy, and it's gonna take several minutes. All right, so I'm just scraping down the bowl because I want everything incorporated, and I'm gonna turn it back on, and again, just let it go on kind of medium-high speed until the mixture is just very, very light and fluffy, because I need all that air. And I'll probably scrape it on 1 or 2 more times. The batter so far is looking very, very light and pale, which is good, very fluffy. Now I'm going to start adding my eggs. I have 5 room temperature large eggs. I'm gonna add them one at a time. And just incorporate each one. Now take your time with this part because you don't want to overwhelm the mixture with liquid from the eggs. Otherwise, it won't emulsify and your batter won't be very smooth. So I'm just going to go one at a time. So last egg. Okay. So now that I have all the eggs incorporated, I'm going to give it another scrape. And adding eggs to this mixture and having it kind of be emulsified in, meaning all the fat is like smoothly combined with the liquid, it can continue to whip this. So the eggs are going to be able to hold air now that they're mixed with the butter and sugar. You can tell if you need to scrape down because the mixture in the center with the eggs will be more yellow than the stuff around the sides. Actually, it's very handy having a glass bowl for this purpose. All right, so now I'm going to turn it back onto medium high and let this whip for another several minutes. And again, I want it like very, very airy and fluffy. So the last step is to incorporate my flour, but actually I have not yet added my extracts. So I'm doing vanilla. I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So unlike a kind of regular almond cake, I'm not adding any other liquid. Like the eggs really are the liquid here. So it makes a very, very thick batter. If I were to add milk or something, I'd have something much closer to like a traditional almond cake. And I'm going to add a little bit of almond extract. So the almond paste has that almond extract-y flavor. So if you don't like a very, very strong almond flavor, you don't have to actually add any extract at all. This extract is pretty old and kind of has lost some of its potency. So I'm going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon. If you're using like normal almond extract that hasn't, been sitting around for a while, I would start with 1/4 or even 1/2 teaspoon. I would start with 1/2 or even 1/4 teaspoon, and then you can taste and kind of like work your way up. But this part is kind of to taste. I don't want it to be overpoweringly like almond extract flavor, which is a flavor I like, but it can be a lot. So I'm going to incorporate that. And then I'm going to stop the mixer and add my flour. This is just 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So I'm just going to add that all at once. And I'm just going to start to pulse it in. Just a kind of quick on and off of the mixer. And then once it's kind of incorporated, mix on low. And then I like to undermix because it's going to get mixed quite a bit more when I add my food coloring. I'm going to scrape down the paddle really well. So you can see the batter has this great texture. It's very, very light and fluffy, which is what you want. If I were to just put all these ingredients together and mix them, it would make a very, very dense cake. So I'm going to just fold it by hand a few times because I have some unincorporated flour. And make sure you're scraping the bottom where you probably didn't get any flour at all. So I'm just folding it. I really have very few little lumps of almond paste, but if you do have them, because maybe your almond paste was a little on the dry side, they will pretty much smooth out during baking, so not to worry. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my 2 extra bowls and my kitchen scale. So I'm going to start by weighing that out. And I have an extra spatula here because I'm making different colors. Close enough. I'm going to grab my pans and my food coloring. I'm actually going to scrape the untinted batter into one of the pans, and then I can use that spatula for one of the colored batches because I don't want to go from tinting with the same spatula to the white version, and that is just about saving myself the trouble of having to wash it or use an extra spatula. Okay, so a note on food coloring. When I made a version last night, because these do need to set up in the fridge overnight, ideally, I used the natural food coloring that I had because I wanted to see if I could get the look of like a classic rainbow cookie, which are like very, very vibrantly colored with natural food coloring? And the answer is no, I cannot. I used like the entire little vial of food coloring and they're pretty pastel. So just know that the version you're gonna see me cut on camera is like pastel colored and it's not the like, sometimes I think they have like way too much food coloring in them. They're like so deeply colored. But I ended up using all of the natural food coloring I had. And now what I have are these gel food coloring like little tubes, which work really well. And gel is great because you're not adding a lot of liquid. So this is gonna make more of that traditional look to the rainbow cookie, but it's not what I have to show you later on. Okay, so I'm gonna do red first. And I would go a little at a time. And another kind of thing to keep in mind is that once it bakes and the batter really kind of hydrates, it's gonna darken a little bit. The color kind of intensifies. Definitely need more than that. And so I'm not gonna tell you how much food coloring to use because it all depends on the type of food coloring that you have. You also don't have to do, there's no reason why it has to be red and green. You could do other colors. Okay, so there's the red. I'm gonna do the green. I think I'm good on the food coloring. I don't think I need to overdo it. You understand the color it's supposed to be. I'm gonna scrape them into my pans. My oven is already preheated and I have the racks arranged because they're not all gonna fit side by side. I'm gonna start by spreading out the untinted batch. And when you're baking these, it's really important that, I'll say this more as they go into the oven, but it's just important that you're keeping an eye on them and making sure to take them out when you see just the lightest amount of browning on the surface because you don't want to overbake them. You want the cakes to stay moist and not dry out. All right, so now I'm gonna do the red layer. It might seem, especially if you're used to baking like normal cakes in layers, it might seem like very, very thin. But just keep in mind that these are going to get stacked and they're going to rise a little bit during baking. And even though it might seem very, very thin, you're going to end up with a fairly tall cookie. Now I'm just going to wipe off the red batter and do the green. Okay, so these are going to go into the oven. Again, preheated to 350. And I have a rack in the upper third and a rack in the lower third. I'm going to put the double wide on top and then the red layer down below, and then halfway through baking, which is about 10 minutes, I'm gonna switch them. I just wanna bake them until I see very light golden browning across the surface. There'll be sort of little bubbles that form on the surface and around the edge. That's where I wanna see a very light golden brown and then they're done, that's it. And so the surface also will look matte, not shiny. That's how you know they're done. The cookies have been in for just over 15 minutes and I checked and they do look done. So they're pulling away from the sides of the pan. They're very lightly browned across the surface where there's little bubbles. So I'm gonna pull them out. Here you can see that browning and the cake kind of pulling away. And the surface texture is matte, so not shiny. And you can see that the color did intensify during baking. So I have to let these cool. And then we're gonna move into the next stage, which is stacking. So the layers of cake in the rainbow cookies are separated by layers of jam, but it not only adds flavor and like a little bit of tartness, which is nice, but it's really like glue that's helping the layers to adhere and they kind of fuse together. So sometimes it's apricot, sometimes it's raspberry. Because we have two different layers of jam, I'm gonna use apricot in one and raspberry in the other. Now, what I've done is I've strained this jam. So you can see it's a little bit fluid still. That's actually really good. But all I did was warm it up in a saucepan, and you don't need a lot of heat. You just need to kind of stir it over like a medium-low heat until the jam is very, very fluid, and then press it through a sieve to collect the solids, because the solids are really gonna get in the way when you're trying to fuse the layers and also when you go to cut. So you just want a smooth, jelly-like mixture. And I have 1/3 cup of the already strained jam. And that's gonna be the right amount of jam for the quarter sheet trays. But again, if you are like, I don't wanna buy 2 different kinds of jam because I don't already have one of them at home, just use all of one. My cakes are ever so slightly warm. They've been cooling probably for 15 minutes. That's actually a good thing because it means there's a little bit of moisture still in the cakes in the form of steam that hasn't escaped yet. And I'm gonna wrap everything really, really well after I assemble, and all that moisture is gonna stay in there and it's gonna help the cakes to fuse together. So I'm gonna start, I have a cutting board here. I just need a flat, wide surface for just like, you know, being able to pick up the stack of cakes when they're done, so I don't have to like manipulate it too much. So I have a cutting board. I'm gonna start with my bottom layer of cake, and I can leave the parchment on the bottom. Now be careful, especially if they're fully cooled, the cakes will become a little bit more brittle, so just be careful when you move them. I'm using my raspberry jam on the bottom next to the red layer. If you need to make it a little more fluid, you can warm it up slightly, you can just throw it in the microwave. But my layer is a tiny bit warm, so that's gonna help it spread even more. And then I have my offset spatula. This part's really fun, and you wanna go all the way to the edges in a thin, even layer. So now my middle layer, which is the white layer, so I have to be careful with this one. I'm gonna just try to basically invert it onto this one, carefully. This is where the parchment comes in really handy because it does help you to maneuver the cakes a little bit. And then go ahead and center it. Now, my apricot jam. There's no reason, I mean, apricot and raspberry are the ones that you see most frequently. There's no reason why it couldn't be another flavor. You could do strawberry if you like that combination with almond, which would be really good. You could do like strained cherry preserves. That would be really delicious. Cherry and almond is kind of a classic. Okay, so you can probably see how this layer, which was the side of the cake that was against the parchment, has the crumb exposed, so it's gonna like soak up more of the jelly, the jam. I want to have so the green is my final layer. I want to have the baked like surface of the green layer on top because that's smoothest, and I want the like crumb exposed on the bottom layer to be against the jelly because that's going to help soak it up. So I'm going to just invert this, take off that parchment, and then you can see the green got pretty intense in terms of the color. And now I'm just going to stack this on top. So you can see how the layers are not perfectly like equal in size. There's some overhang, some areas where like the white layer is smaller, but there's just going to be trim when we go to cut them so that we can make those clean, even sides, which I never get mad about having trim because it's a chance for you to taste the cookies before you serve them. And so that's like your cooked snacks. So I'm going to wrap this fully in plastic. So really the key to cutting the cookies is to weight the stack of cakes because that's going to help the layers to kind of adhere and fuse. So this stack of cakes is actually very, very even as far as the thickness. You can see that I don't really have like a domed center, that the sides and edges are pretty much the same height as the middle, which is great. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna weight this down. And you don't want something like 20-pound dumbbell on here, but you just want something with a little bit of mass to help everything fuse. And that's gonna go into the fridge overnight. And that's just gonna help you when you cut the cookies that those layers are gonna stay together and not fall apart. I'm gonna grab the stack of cakes that I made last night. And just remember, like these colors look really vibrant and are gonna look like the classic rainbow cookie from the Italian bakery. The ones I grab are not. These are my pastel, like natural food coloring ones. So just everybody manage their expectations around what you're gonna see. So you can see I have my two cutting boards. And here's what I did. Because on this one, the sides were a little bit lower than the middle, if I were to just put the cutting board on top, it would only compress the center of the cakes. So I just like put a towel and like folded in the ends. It did make like a little bit of a of a line in there, but I just wanted there to be even pressure all the way around. So this block of cakes is like incredibly solid. It's like cold, that butter is cold and hardened. This is gonna slice really, really easily. All right, so I'm actually gonna get this entirely off of the parchment paper. And now the final step before I cut, there's really two steps. There is, well, three. I'm gonna melt the chocolate. I'm gonna spread it over the surface and then just stick it back in the fridge for a quick chill to set the chocolate. I'm not gonna temper it. It doesn't really need all that. I'm just gonna melt this and I'm gonna do it on low power in like 30-second bursts and just stir in between. So here the chocolate's warm. It's not like super hot, but it's very smooth and fully melted. So I'm gonna pour it over the cookie. I generally am not someone who really loves chocolate and fruit together, but there's just something that works about the combination of the almond, the jam, and the chocolate on top. Okay, so I'm just gonna spread this. So my chocolate layer has been applied. I went very close to the edge, but I didn't have to have like full coverage because there will be trim. And it's a pretty generous layer. And it is starting to set because the sponge, the almond cake was cold, which is really helpful. But I'm gonna stick it in the fridge just for it to fully set, and then we can cut them. So you're gonna go in the fridge just like 5 or 10 minutes until I see that the chocolate is hardened, which it's already on its way. One of the most common issues with rainbow cookies is the slicing. And sometimes you get chocolate kind of chipping off. So actually what's nice is if you can chill it down so the chocolate sets, but then let it temper a little bit so the chocolate is not like quite so brittle. That will help you with the slicing. Also being able to wipe the knife off is helpful. Using the right amount of jam is also really key, because if there's too much jam, not only are your layers gonna be more prone to sliding around, but you're gonna then, the knife is gonna get like more wet and it's gonna make slicing harder. So what I wanna do first is just cut away the edges so I get nice clean sides. And don't be afraid of making a bit of trim here. It's just inevitable. And again, like that just becomes your snack. So I'm just using long strokes. First I have to get through the chocolate. So now that I have my nice, very square, cleanly cut rectangle, I can go ahead and cut the cookies lengthwise. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut lengthwise into quarters, so in half and in half again. And then I'm gonna cut crosswise into thin slices, because I prefer more of a slice cookie than like a cube. How cute are these? They're a little pastel, but very, very cute. I'm just gonna go ahead and slice the rest of the cookies, and I'm going to be careful about just wiping off my knife so that I'm not dragging chocolate down through all the layers as I go. What's great about slicing these cookies is once you get that slab trimmed and cut lengthwise, with one stroke of the knife, you get 4 cookies in one go. So I already have several dozen cut, but I didn't even do half the slab. So I just wanted to show you so we can taste them. I am gonna go back once my batch from today has a chance to set and chill a little bit and cut them, just because I want to see that vibrant color. These are cute, but they're like a little more, they look more like Easter than like a Tricolore cookie. And you know what? These are a little bit denser, and one thing I realized is because I was adding so much food coloring, I really kind of over mixed this batter and ended up deflating it a little bit. So you're gonna notice when I cut the batch from today, it's gonna be a little taller and a little more open looking. But the flavor of these is still really good. I did sneak a little taste, but I'm gonna show you what they look like. I really do like seeing the different colors of jam, the apricot on top and the raspberry on the bottom with the like red layer. I like that amount of chocolate. They cut really cleanly once that chocolate is set. And you can see that they've held together. The layers are not like sliding around. They're a tiny bit cold still, but they've mostly tempered. Initially, the raspberry and the chocolate really pop. And then the almond kind of comes in. I love the chewiness. I love being able to bite through all the layers. Kind of addictive. Like, you eat one, you kind of want to keep eating them. Definitely not too sweet and not overpoweringly almondy, which is kind of the problem that I have with a lot of versions that you buy. So, is it a cookie? Is it cake? It's kind of both. To me, it's like none of the steps of this cookie are difficult, but it is a process of assembling. So to me, it's like the perfect baking project for a Saturday or a Sunday. Set it up the night before, cut them the next day, and then you have like literally dozens of cookies to give out to people or to save. I've never tried freezing them, but I'm sure that you could once they're all assembled and cut. So very, very satisfying to make. You can customize them with your own color scheme if you'd like to, or go with the classic red, white, and green. Thank you so much for watching. I love being back with more episodes of Dessert Person. This cookie was sort of a great, actually Harris thought of it. He was like, why haven't you done rainbow cookies? Thought it was a great idea. If you have ideas for other episodes, let us know. It's always fun to read them in the comments. We're here for you. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.